you are going to be seeing more and more longer and longer interim times in churches. What do I mean by interim times? I mean a pastor has left and it's going to be a longer period before the next pastor comes along. So, what do we do about that? Well, it means for one thing, we need to talk to interim pastors. And we need to talk to interim pastors about staying around, what they're going to do. It's just a lot of things we're going to talk about. We're going to answer the question, what is a healthy interim pastor tenure? And we'll get to that in just a minute. Remember, please, that Belay is our sponsor, Belay Solutions. Remember that they provide you workers, that they are really taking care of the workers. Belay is, while you get the services of a executive assistant or bookkeeper or some other person to help you be more productive, they are taking care of it all. You've heard me say on many occasions, I have used Belay since the inception of Church Answers, and I'll continue to do so. I swear by the effectiveness and the great ministry of Belay Solutions. They help you to become more productive. And in light of that, they have a new ebook that is available called The Power of Productivity. It's available to our listeners and our viewers at the Church Answers podcast. How do you get it? You just text THOM, THOM, at 55123. Text THOM, THOM, at 55123, and you will get the Belay download, The Power of Productivity, the ebook. Okay, what is a healthy interim pastor tenure? Maybe I need to have a second part of that question. And why is it important? I hinted at it at the beginning of this podcast. Interim pastor tenures, let me put it another way, interim periods are growing longer. The time between when a pastor leaves a church and the new pastor comes in are longer. Now, you may want to know why. I'll briefly address that. One of the reasons why is when a church uses a search committee, they take way too long. I mean, they receive resumes. They call through the resumes. Usually they're volunteers, lay people, and they have meet once a week, and it takes way too long. I mean, there's been so much time lost with ineffective search committees. That's one of the reasons. Another reason is the supply of pastors is going down. It's getting harder and harder to find a pastor. You may get a lot of resumes, but you're not going to get a lot of qualified resumes like you used to. So the number of resumes or candidates going down. And so as a reason for that, it's going to take churches longer to get pastors on average than they did in the past, sometimes significantly longer. I remember the days when it was 6 to 9 months. And now I'm surprised when I hear about a church getting a pastor in less than a year. And it's not unheard of, 2 years, sometimes even 2 years plus. Way too long. Way too long. So we want to answer this question. What is a healthy interim pastor tenure? In other words, how long should the interim pastor stay? Hey, before I even get into this, let me just mention, because we're seeing so many people do this, we have a certification called Interim Pastor University. And it is a certification that we teach people how to be an effective interim pastor. We're working with some denominations doing this as well. And we're seeing a great influx of people coming in to the certification. We'll put it in the show notes. I didn't plan to talk about it, but we'll put it in the show notes. Great certification. And what I will do is I'm going to do this spontaneously, and Alana will adjust this well. We will give a 50% discount to 10 people. We'll give a 50% discount scholarship, if you will, to 10 people who will go through Interim Pastor University. So she'll put that link in the show notes. And if you want to be trained and certified as interim pastor, it will really help you get a few steps ahead. Again, I didn't plan to mention that, so we'll have to do a little extra work. But by the time you listen to this on its release date of October 19th, it'll be there. Okay. What is a right, healthy interim pastor tenure? Well, here's the favorite answer of Tom Rainer. It depends. It really does. There are so many external and internal factors that it's hard to nail down, okay, this is the perfect amount of time an interim pastor should stay at a church. But I am going to give you, obviously, some general principles. And I hope these general principles will help you as you are an interim pastor, or if you're in a church with an interim, it'll help you as well. The first thing you need to ask of yourself to answer this question is, do you want an interim preacher or do you want an interim pastor? There's a significant difference between the two, although many times someone will be asked just to do the preaching role, they'll still call them the interim pastor. That's okay. But an interim preacher is someone who's filling the pulpit every week. I've done that a lot. I think I've done that with 10 or 11 churches over a 14-year period. It was, I literally never had a break I go from one interim to another, and they typically lasted a year or a little bit more. And I was an interim preacher. I did not do the pastoral responsibilities. Most of these churches were in town several hours from where I lived. And so I obviously could not be away from my work. I was at the seminary at that time where I was dean of a seminary. So I could not be away. But I did a lot of interims. But I was an interim preacher. I just told them I could not be their pastor. And what would usually happen is they would have someone on staff who would assume the pastoral roles like counseling, the roles of administration, if there's staff issues. So there's someone there that's taking care of that. So the first question you got to ask is, do you want an interim preacher or an interim pastor? Interim preachers are easier to find than interim pastors. Interim pastors have to take on more responsibility because they are filling the role of a pastor, maybe not doing everything, but doing a lot of them. Sometimes interim pastors actually move onto the location, whether they are renting a place or whatever the case may be, so they can be in the community. So the first question you need to ask is, are we getting an interim pastor? Are we getting an interim preacher? I will say this, typically a healthy interim pastor tenure is longer than a healthy interim preacher tenure because the person that has become their pastor. So that's just that is just a general rule that pastor and preacher makes a lot of difference. But let's go with interim pastor role. What is too long and what is not long enough? Well, I don't think there's a what is not long enough. If the church finds a successor to the previous pastor in 6 months, 6 months is the perfect time. You don't want to stay around because the new guy's coming in. So that's a good time. What if your church has not found a pastor in a year? I would say don't worry about it, because for the reasons that I just stated, an interim pastor is going to be at the church a longer period because the period of the interim is longer. However, this is rough numbers. Once you get in the 18 to 24 month range, I want to tell you what starts happening at the church. They start becoming dependent upon you. They start becoming dependent upon you as the pastor, even though you're not the pastor. Now, you may be fine with that. You may say, I don't mind being considered as pastor. That's another conversation into itself. But sometime in the 18 to 24 month range, if you're still the interim pastor, what is going to happen is the church is going to move more slowly because they've got someone they need. Now, if you become the part-time pastor there, if you become the pastor there, okay, that's a different story. But what happens from 18 to 24 months usually is dependence is set in, and you as the interim pastor are contributing that dependence because they have become too dependent upon you and they are not looking with enough diligence for the next person. So what is a healthy interim pastor tenure? I'm going to say up to 18 months, maybe 24. But at that point, dependence sets in. And so churches need to be pushed a little bit that they cannot continue to depend upon the interim pastor, and they really need to go in and get that person that will become their full-time pastor. Hey, once again, just let me remind you, look at Interim Pastor University. Great certification. We're going to have some scholarships available for 50% of the tuition to the first 10 of you. You'll see that link in there. Check it out. Also, check out Belay, belaysolutions.com. Check out their new book, The Power of Productivity. Go to THOM, THOM at 55123. As always, thank you for being a part of the Church Answers podcast. We release 3 of these a week. I'm always happy to be with you. See you later. Hey, folks, this is a PS to our podcast. We got some exciting stuff that we want to offer you absolutely for free. Sam, when you think about predictive factors in a church's growth, if you take out demographics, what are some things that come to mind? Just two. I mean, don't give me a list of 10. Just two or three things that come to mind on predictive growth of a church.
Well, evangelism and whether the church is doing it or not.
Bingo.
And then I will add, is it an ongoing evangelism emphasis?
Double bingo. Well? And maybe something about leadership and their commitment to that. So all of the above.
Evangelistic churches have evangelistic pastors. Is the staff, is the lead pastor doing the work themselves?
We have a free download for you, and it's actually a sheet that you can self-score. You answer 20 questions, anywhere from strongly disagree to strongly agree, and we come back and we predict what your growth rate is going to be for the next year in worship attendance. It's not a perfect tool, but it's a good tool. There's a link to that for the attendance predictor. Look in the show notes. You'll absolutely love it. That's cool. We'll see you soon.